All right, and let's get started. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm Andrea Miller, and I'm the founding board member for Center for Common Ground. We are going to be talking about two things tonight. We're going to start off talking about what we are doing now, the states where we are currently working, and how you can engage. And then we're going to take a look at what we did in 2021. You're going to get a preview of our annual report. We finished the first draft today. It will probably get published definitely by the end of April, maybe even by the middle of April. It will be on the website. But before we get to that, let's get to the task at hand. What functions and jobs are currently available and what we need to do. So, right now, we are currently working on three primaries. North Carolina has a primary on May 17th. Georgia and Alabama have primary elections a week later on May 24th. Now, North Carolina and Georgia are both early voting states. So that means we are working on those states right now because in North Carolina, people actually start voting around the end of April. So for those three states, I will have about 1 million cell numbers for North Carolina. So there will be a texting campaign using Outreach Circle for North Carolina. There will also be a texting campaign for Georgia. What is happening with Georgia is the Georgia Secretary of State is dragging his feet announcing the early voting locations. So what we're seeing is the counties are announcing the early voting locations, not all, but some. And we think a lot of the counties where we want to work are going to have their early voting locations up. I've already checked. Fulton is up, Gwinnett is up. That would be enough for us to start theoretically texting and phone banking. When we look at Alabama, since Alabama only has election day voting, we have already done our postcarding campaign to Alabama. There are postcards still available for North Carolina and for Georgia. To get more details on this upcoming work, Gabriel, are you ready to talk about phone banking now?
Yeah, sure. We have active phone banks that are going into North Carolina, and we have phone banking. We have guided phone banks Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday every week now. Um, Josie just put the link to the phone bank page in the chat, and you can train yourself and make calls on your own time, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. In the state that we're calling, or you can join one of those phone banks that is every Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and the you can sign up for that on the website as well. So everything is right there on the site. So we look forward to seeing you.
Gabe, can you drop a link in the chat for everybody, please?
Yeah, Josie just put the last thing that Josie just put in the chat has the link directly to our phone bank page.
Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, thanks. Anything else?
Yeah, well, it sounds like if we're starting to see early voting locations on the Georgia County websites, it looks like we'll be putting some of those up soon.
Right. I think what we can do is we'll just go into rebrandly, and at least initially we'll have to build them by county because that's what we've got. But Gwinnett and Fulton will really keep us busy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Carrie, do you want to do an update on postcards? Because I saw your note in the chat. Yes, we have got postcards happening.
We do indeed. Um, so hi everybody. We've got 3 campaigns going all at once. We've got Alabama, which has the later mail by dates because they don't have early voting. But so that's the beginning of May for mailing to Alabama. And I just wanted to mention, if you watched the hearings and you remember the Alabama Attorney General, who wouldn't acknowledge Biden as our duly elected president, he's up for re-election. So that's kind of a motivating little thing to add fire under us. And Reverend Will Boyd is running for Senate, part of Omega Sci-Fi. And that's exciting.
And they are in the House tonight. Yay.
Yay. So, yeah, and even though gerrymandering hurt the congressional district representation, it won't affect the Senate or AG races or local races. And so we're pretty excited about our campaign to Alabama. And then the Georgia and North Carolina both have mail by dates April 15th to 25th. And we know there are a lot of exciting things going on in Georgia. And we know that our work in Georgia made a difference in 2020, and we have a 1.7 million addresses, so we need lots of writers on that. And North Carolina has the really kind of unique, I believe, one-stop voting, allowing voters to register if they're unregistered or deregistered and update their address if needed, correct anything wrong with their registration, and vote all at once if they vote early. So we're really emphasizing early voting. Well, for that and for Georgia, avoiding those horrible long lines. We don't want people to have to put up with that. We want them to vote early and, you know, have a nice relaxing evening on election day. And in terms a little more on North Carolina, there's a Senate seat being vacated. So that's interesting. And we've got phone banking already going, as you've heard. And that's about it, I guess. We've got all the information you need is on the postcarding part of the website. And Josie just put the link up again. And yeah, we've got our list of regional organizers in the actual website. So if you want to find someone close to you or fairly close to you who can help you out, you can email the person in that list.
All right, great. Thanks, Carrie.
Sure.
And I just dropped a note in the chat. North Carolina just this week purged about 400,000 voters from their voter rolls for not voting in the past 3 federal elections. So last month, we had about 435,000 voters who were 0 for 3 in the general election, meaning they had not voted in a federal election in 6 years. At that point, there is always the danger that at some point the Department of Elections is simply going to rather unceremoniously dump those voters, and the voters got dumped earlier this week. So now when we look at the voter file, there are 0 for 3 voters in North Carolina. So early voting is really, 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 really key. One of the things we are encouraging our democracy centers to do, because they are all in communities with low propensity voters, is we are strongly proposing a language change. So do not talk to people about register to vote. Speak with people about register and vote. They need to do both things. And then when talking to people about their registration, the question is not, are you registered? Because everyone is going to say, yes, I'm registered. The question is your registration active and up to date? That will give people pause, because unless they check frequently, they really don't know. And this could cause the 400,000 people who just got dumped from the rolls to avoid getting a very rude surprise if they wait until election day, because you can only vote and register during the early voting period. That is not available on election day. And the question is, are dropped voters notified at all? They kind of sort of are, and they kind of sort of aren't. If the voter has moved and the forwarding address has expired, then basically the voters are going to get no notification whatsoever. When they get the notification, normally because it looks like a junk postcard, most people throw it away and never even notice what it is. So that is a big problem with how they notify voters that they're going to be removed from the rolls. So most people, even if they get the notice, miss it. A lot of people may have moved. So remember, a lot of people lost their homes in the pandemic. They may not live where they used to, and they are not going to get that notice. I want to bring up Sandy Radov. Sandy is one of the co-directors of Students for Justice, which is our internship program. And we are getting ready to launch a new program. So Sandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everybody. I wanted to let everyone know that we are in the process of taking applications for our summer program of Students for Justice. We have, at this point, 32 open slots where young people can come on board, and putting in 15 to 20 hours a week can make $1,900 to $2,500, getting educated about the electoral process, including many presentations by Andrea Miller, and doing a tremendous amount of voter outreach. And this year, we are focusing on 3 states: North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. At some point in the future, the distant future, when we have enough money, we'd love to cover every state that Center for Common Ground covers. But right now, we only have enough to cover 3 states. And we are open for college students to apply if they attend college in one of those 3 states, or will be living at home in one of those 3 states for the summer. So again, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, college students eligible to apply to our program. And right after I finish speaking, I will put the link to the application form in the chat. And we would love to get recommendations from you guys, or if you want to circulate it to young people you may know in those 3 states, that would be fantastic.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Sandy. And then there were some great questions in the chat. One of the questions in the chat was, are we postcarding infrequent voters? Because this is a primary, basically everybody is an infrequent voters. What we found is our community of color voters tend to not vote in primary elections. Now, you don't get purged for not voting in a primary, but less than 20% of the eligible population vote in primaries. So that means 80% of eligible voters are not voting in primaries. What we have found is if we can get a voter to turn out for a primary, odds are 80 to 85% we can get that voter to show up for the general. So we are really working with our democracy centers to begin emphasizing primary elections, telling people if you want to care about who is on the ballot in November, that means you're going to need to show up and vote in the primary. And people just don't vote in primaries. And then let's see. And then there was the question, are we phone banking to purge voters? No, because they're no longer on the list. We have no idea who they are. When we say the voters have been purged, they are no longer on any list where we have phone numbers or even addresses and a means to contact them. No, older voter lists are not available. No. All the vendors update at about the same time. They get their data directly from the states. And once the state purges, all the vendors are getting the same data. Didn't we get the data before they were purged? The phone banks run on live data. So the phone banks will not have purged voters. The postcard data actually will have the voters that may have been purged because we generated the list prior to the purge. So yes. Thank you, Carrie, for reminding me how early we generated that list. Yes. Mm-hmm. And then let's, no. When we choose the counties where we are going to work, these are counties with the largest percentage of BIPOC voters. It has nothing to do with how anybody voted on anything. So when we are doing advocacy campaigns, yes. When we are working electorally, it is the law of big numbers. All right. Are there any more questions about what we are doing, what we are going to do? And then there's a question, Carrie, in the chat. If people want to write postcards in a particular county, can that happen? The answer is yes. And Carrie, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Well, I would say it depends on whether that county's gone out already or not, but people can request from their organizer and see if they can get assigned a particular county. So that would be the way to do it.
And when we're using voter letters, we can always tell how many addresses we have left in a county, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't postcard. I'm purely over on the texting side. But I knew and understood that was one of the functions of voter letters. So if we have a large group that wants to postcard and they are hoping for 10 or 15,000 addresses, normally we can say, well, you can have these 7 counties where we've got at least 15,000 addresses. That would be a single county.
And Brian Kramer is the data master of assigning large groups to counties. So he would be the one to talk to. But if anyone has a particular question, I'm not sure if Brian's on. If you want to email me, I'll put my email in the chat.
Mecklenburg County, which is where Charlotte is, should be in the postcard campaign for the primary. It really should. There's a note in the chat that's asking about Mecklenburg. So it may be that Mecklenburg County addresses have already gone out, but Mecklenburg County is one of the largest counties with BIPOC population. That was one of our target counties. And then we always get this question, is texting or postcards more effective? Texting can only happen if we have cell phone numbers. We have far fewer cell phone numbers than we have addresses. So it's, texting does give us that ability to have a back and forth with the voter. There are many, many voters in all the states where we work, where not only do we not have a cell number, we don't have a phone number. And so the only way to possibly touch that voter is with a postcard. So yes, postcards are very, very effective when we have no other means of reaching out to the voter. All we've got is an address. When we have a cell number, we do have that ability to text a voter. Texting is very fast, which is why people like it. And you can quickly go through 100,000 texts with a group of 20 people very, 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 very quickly. And you will have something on people's phones. One of the other things that we will be working on, it may not be ready for the primary, but it will be ready for the general, is when we had our own custom texting program, Text%. When we would ask voters, what is your voting plan? Are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to early vote? Or are you going to vote on election day? Text%, if they said they were going to early vote, would automatically text them their closest early voting location. It would just automatically look it up in its own database and say your closest early voting location is this, here's the address, it's open on these dates, and here are the hours. So we have asked our vendor, PDI, to rewrite their texting program. Luckily, I'm a really good customer, so I can ask vendors to rewrite their programs for me and to add that function, and they are working on it. All righty. And nope, we do not have any of that old information about which counties did the most purging. Again, they are going to get postcards and Pam, yeah, we'll take a look at Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg is on our list of target counties. So not sure where you got that information. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And then Sandy's got notes about how you can apply to Students for Justice. Volunteers provide their own stamps unless you are democracy centers. Now, there was a question about how do we support the democracy centers. I'll be talking more about democracy centers when we Pam talk to me, and I'll figure out what's going on with that. And then the democracy centers, many of them are now beginning to do their own postcard. Since democracy centers are in low-income communities, which is why they're there, we provide the postcards and the stamps for democracy centers. So that could be one way that you support democracy centers, either providing postcards and postage for them, sending funds to cover postcards and postage. Why is that important? That's important because communities, democracy centers are located in communities where 55% or more of the population that's registered no longer votes. So that means the folks in these communities are very, very high risk targets that at some point they're going to get purged. And when these communities begin taking on their own work of turning out people in their communities where they are known, they are trusted, they live there, that means come the next election cycle, then we may not really need to work in that community, that we'll be able to give them their addresses and the postcards, and they will contact the people in their community, allowing us to move to another community that needs help. Because right now, what happens in many communities, people show up before an election, do turnout, come back in 2 years, and it's rinse and repeat. We are always starting over in the same place. Democracy centers are there year round. And as they begin to work with people in their community, we are beginning to see a change in the voting patterns and habits of the people who live there. When the people who live there begin to become voting rights activists themselves, they are no longer going to be infrequent voters. So that's the whole concept behind the democracy centers. All right, let me get our annual report. And I'm just thrilled that my internet connection is still working, because every once in a while it decides, nope, I'm not going to work. All right, we're not going to be looking at this. So yeah, we will. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get another version so that my screen isn't quite sloppy. Here we go. Let's work with this version, the PDF file. This is our 2021 annual report, and this will let me answer a lot of questions that people have about democracy centers. So for the cover, you're actually looking at people from local democracy centers. So this handsome fellow right here, Anthony Hall, Anthony is with us tonight. Anthony is with the Florence Democracy Center. He's like, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anthony. And then we've got Roanoke, we've got Hawkinsville, that's Florence again. And then we've got Richmond, and East Rents is here from Alabama. So these are folks from the actual democracy centers. So in 2021, we didn't have a presidential election. So what we did was, our main focus was developing these democracy centers, getting ready for 2022 and 2024. All right, yes, that means we actually have a plan, and we are working our plan. So our current democracy centers are in Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And we are expanding in Georgia, courtesy of our partner, the Atlanta NAACP, to add 15 new locations to the 3 locations that we already have. Frank Mosley is here, who is our National Democracy Center leader, who works with all the democracy centers on their engagement plans, what they're going to do on the ground. And then the Democracy Center IT lead, John, is here as well. And then Josie was greeting a lot of you. Josie is our deputy policy director. So in 2021, immediately after the Georgia runoff, when the Georgia legislature went into session on January 13th, and by January 20th, started spewing out some of the most awful voter suppression bills. Josie was the one who was working on developing the alerts that our local leaders could send to their folks, explaining to them, wait a minute, your legislators just introduced a bill that is going to do this. Let's write them and tell them, no, we disagree with it. The number one goal of all the voter suppression legislation in the state of Georgia was to end no excuse in-person voting. And they were not able to do it. So we generated 135,000 calls and emails to elected officials. Thousands of volunteers made 170,000 calls. We mailed over 1 million handwritten postcards and sent over 1 million texts and we combined it, voter mobilization and issue advocacy. We don't lobby, but we create digital tools so that our local partners on the ground can use those tools and then do outreach to the people in their community. We also develop training programs. We want to make sure that our Democracy Center leaders and our organizers are trained. So some of the courses that we built in 2021, volunteer recruitment, becoming an effective citizen lobbyist. Again, we don't lobby, but we'll teach you how to lobby, how to get earned media. And we are still working on and building state-specific civics courses. Now, Democracy Centers. They're local, as I mentioned, and we've got quite a number of them. And again, they are only in communities where we have a lot of voters of color who have stopped voting. One of their first jobs when they open up is to survey their community and talk to people about what they care about, what hurts, what are the pain points in this community. Is there something that's going to be happening in the General Assembly? You can see the Richmond Palm Card, cannabis money. In the previous General Assembly, Virginia basically legalized cannabis. And what they were supposed to work out this legislative session was how they were going to share the revenue from the sales tax with the communities that were harmed. Well, the city of Richmond was greatly harmed by the war on drugs. So many residents in the city of Richmond were very, very interested in this fight over how much or what percentage of the cannabis money were they going to be able to get to use in their communities. When we looked at some of our more rural communities, the rural communities weren't really interested in cannabis money. That's not really a big problem out here. But economic security, they need good jobs. They want health care for all, and they want access to good education. So we don't tell local communities what their issues are. They tell us, and then we help mold those into basically palm cards that candidates would use. And when they go out canvassing, with these palm cards. And they tell people, we'd like to talk with you about what's going on in our community. And when the conversation switches to voting, they have earned the trust of the people they're speaking with. Democracy centers do a lot of relational organizing, and they're using Outreach Circle. And what I did was I just showed 3 sample things that we can do with Outreach Circle. Again, many of these communities, or all of these communities, are low income. So we wanted to make sure they had information about COVID. So on Outreach Circle, we put, this is how you can get your free COVID test kit. We also had a really charming video by Kerry Washington talking about vote all the way down the ballot. We also text through Outreach Circle, and we had a very interesting Senate race in South Carolina, and we used Outreach Circle to let people know there was an election on March 29th, which is a really weird time to have an election. But the Senate member who had held the seat for 40 years died. And so suddenly there was an open seat. Now, what do I mean by relational organizing? In Hawkinsville, which is a food insecure community in Georgia, when they opened their democracy center, it was literally right before the Georgia runoff. They knocked on 2,400 doors and they had 2,100 conversations. How on earth was that possible? When people found out that they were the folks who distributed food, they were more than happy to talk to them. And in June of 2021, they opened Rose's Food Pantry 2 doors down from the Democracy Center. Roanoke was the very first Democracy Center in Virginia. In Roanoke, they did movie nights and invited the community to come and watch movies under the stars that they showed on the side of their office building. They distributed baskets of toiletries. Over the holidays, they had food baskets, and they had baskets of hats and gloves and warm socks for children, because this is what the community needed. And so we've got information on the issues that communities that the Democracy Center service face. And literally every community has different challenges. The Democracy Centers are there to help people articulate the challenges, begin to work on them, and then when primary time comes around, to take their challenges to people running for office and say, will you support us on this? And after they get elected, to hold them accountable. How did you do on these things? So not only are we giving people a voice, we're showing people their power. Texting. We spent roughly 877,000 electoral, well, okay, we sent 800, well, we sent over 1 million texts, but through Outreach Circle and Spoke, it was nearly 900,000 texts. Most of them were election information messages, predominantly for Virginia. We did a very small city council election in Opelika, Alabama. And we did the Atlanta municipal elections. In Georgia in 2021, when everybody could talk about was the election in Virginia, no one seemed to have an appetite to talk about the fact that in Georgia, 50 municipal elections changed hands. Gabe already gave you the phone banking report, and these were the states that we were focusing on. And then this is a really important slide because I had the opportunity to track early voting turnout among Black voters in live time. Literally every day they posted the numbers by race, by sex, by income of who actually had voted. And so one of the things that we were able to see is places that we had democracy centers had significantly higher turnout than places where we didn't. Who would have dreamed that Roanoke, Virginia, down in Southwest Virginia, could turn in an 18.21% early voting turnout in a community where 55% of the people just didn't bother to vote? Who would have thought that Fairfax County, the largest county in Northern Virginia, would turn in an 8.55% early voting turnout among Black voters? So for all voters in Virginia, early voting was a brand new thing. The first time we had ever in our history had early voting was in 2020. And in 2021, we basically changed the law and said, we're going to have 45 days of early voting. I want you to look at the Democracy Center down on the third line, Amelia County. Amelia County is one of the counties in Southside Virginia. That number is almost unbelievable, 53.68%. The number is so high because in Amelia County, which was a tobacco county, people don't vote in schools. A lot of people vote in granaries. Well, when you're not voting in a school, schools have laws about how close you can be and have a gun. Granaries have no such laws. So when the voters discovered, wait a minute, you mean I can go vote early and I can avoid the Confederate show of strength on election day? The voters took advantage and they went to vote early. And I hope you think this is a really, really, really attractive annual report, because our team has really been working on this. So again, in 2021, since we didn't have a lot of elections, but we had a lot of bad legislation, it became the year of supporting citizen advocacy. So I added this line right here after I saw the image the team wanted to use. Our voters found their voice and their power. So while we didn't delete or we didn't defeat all the bad legislation, we made a lot of the legislation significantly weaker than was originally hoped by the sponsors. So we did advocacy at the state level. And of course, everybody heard about the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We are part of a number of coalitions where we work side by side with them, sharing alerts. And we had a special text message tool that we were using, and we sent nearly 200,000 text messages using that tool. This will be on the website in about 2 to 3 weeks when we do all the final edits, and then we're going to publish it. You are the very first people getting an opportunity to see it. We have so many pictures. This is kind of our scrapbook of what we did in 2021. And then postcards. So what we did was we had a lot of narrative about the postcards. We made it easier to get your mind around it, what we did in each state, by converting it to a graphic. And then we talk about our new voter letter system, and we have a new postcard shop. So it was a very, very amazing year. The work that we did in Georgia, we are credited with being part of the team that helped turn the tide in Georgia. And they wrote a book called The Georgia Way, where all the partners talked about what they did. And we are hoping that this becomes a primer for other states where they want to change the face of their legislature, be it their state legislature or their federal. This is a guidebook of what you need to do. And then Sandy and Claire, we did not forget our internship program. So we have information about Students for Justice in the annual report. And then we talk about what we're going to be doing in 2022. So our focus states right now, there are 9. Alabama, which has a primary on May 24th. Arizona, their primary is in August, as is Florida. Georgia is May 24th. North Carolina is May 17th. South Carolina is June 14th. Texas, we already had Texas, that was March 1st. And Virginia will be June 21st. Now, we are adding a brand new state. We've never worked there before. We're adding Louisiana. We are very interested in Louisiana because the Louisiana primary is November 8th. Louisiana is a little different. And their general election is December 10th. So that gives us one state where it's going to be the only game in town. In 2020, we reached 14 million voters by postcard, by text, by phone. We are figuring in 2022, our planned voter outreach will be between 23 and 25 million voters of color. And our democracy centers being on the ground in those focus states will really, really help. And then finally, our RV, which made 5 trips to Georgia, was in Alabama for the Magic City Classic. And some of you know they stole whatever that thing is under a car, our catalytic inverter. We finally got the new one. The RVG will get a new catalytic inverter. And after we get the new catalytic inverter, it's going to get a brand new wrap. And we will be using, in addition to the logos on the back of so many of our organizational supporters, we will also be using a lot of pieces of Chuck Sperry's Flower of Democracy poster, which he did for the Equal Rights Amendment. So that is basically the presentation. We've got pages about the staff. We've got pages about the board. And that's it. I will entertain questions. and Democracy Center leaders, you are in the annual report. We thank you on the very last page where everybody will be able to see you. So, questions? Thank you, Janice. I thought it was pretty cool too. Yes, Elsa, 23 to 25 million people is going to be our goal this year. Mhm. Mecklenburg, we are working on it. So Cynthia, you and I need to talk. Oh, wait a minute. Let me look at this. The general election in Louisiana is December 10th. Louisiana is an odd state. They have chosen not to have their general election, their federal general election, on the same day as everyone else. The one exception would be presidential election. This is a midterm, so the president is not on the ballot, so their election is December 10th. Again, states' rights, baby, states' rights. All right. All right. Yes, I'm getting lots of congratulations. It looks really nice. So yes, we were very, very, very excited. And again, our annual report is not put together by designers. It is done in-house, predominantly Gabriel, Josie, many of you know Justin, who is busy celebrating his 18th birthday today. I refer to Justin as our annual report whisperer, and they are the primary leads who put the annual report together. So team Gabe, Josie, Justin, John, Frank, thank you all so very much. Carrie, who wrote the postcard section, it is an honor to work with all of you. As I said, this will be on the website in approximately 3 weeks. We still have a little bit of tweaking to do. And once it's totally tweaked, at that point, it will go on the website. All right. Yes. Do we have any other questions? Because I think we're going to go home on time tonight. We're going, yes. All right. All right. All right. All right. Thank you all very much. What I'm going to do is turn off the recording. This will, you will get an email probably by Saturday with the link to this recording. As I said, in at least 3 weeks, might even be sooner, the annual report will be posted on the website.